And I genuinely wonder whether Amanda Platell will learn from this very, very sorry incident. But honestly, I don't suspect that she will. Why Jason Arday's story reminds me so much of Meghan's. And if you didn't know, Amanda wrote and published this story, this poor piece of journalism, before Jason Arday sadly decided to unalive himself, mainly due to the media pressure that he was under. Now, there's no doubt that Jason Arday's backstory may have been added to. He may have included a bit of theatre in his backstory, but the press hounded him for literally weeks, and the result of that hounding was that he didn't want to be around anymore. And this is absolutely the same as what they wanted to happen to Meghan, but more importantly, what they still want to happen to Meghan, because this article was written days ago, and it's insinuating strongly that Meghan is some kind of mentally unstable, glorified fantasist that's rewritten history using her own pen and hence has deceived audiences globally. Not the case. I really hope Amanda on this Sunday morning in the UK is having a sit down and having a word with herself about the consequences of her journalism, because the consequences of articles like this are massive. Not can be massive, are massive. They were massive for this gentleman here. They were massive for Caroline Flack. They were massive for other members of the community, whether they were famous or whether they were unintentionally made famous or not. It's time for Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace to stop feeding the media and to stop telling them to write negativity about Meghan, to take people's eyes and ears away from criticising the taxpayer-funded, non-working, parasitic royal family and their legacy of zero achievements across decades. That's it. That's my rant. My opinion's not even important. Yours is.
This was not supposed to be a recording day, but we have to talk about Jason Arday and the British media coverage. For those who don't know me, my name is Meredith Constant, and I'm a royal commentator who focuses on the British media. Jason Arday, who was a Cambridge scholar and professor, was found dead on August 14th after sustained, relentless coverage from the media over accusations of plagiarism. We are already hearing the media say that this is an important story. Of course, we should report on it. It's what the public wants to hear about. To which I say, how much of this was actual public interest and how much of this was sponsored to bring in clicks and drive the conversation? News Corp, which is a UK watchdog, published an incredible deep dive into just what the media coverage was like for Jason. Let's go with the argument for a second that plagiarism allegations, it's a right cause for people to cover. The public deserves to know, whatever. If that is the case, then why does the coverage pick up exponentially after Jason resigns on August 4th? Why aren't we reporting when appropriate into what might be going on in what is a private investigation and should be a private investigation? And even more so than that, why are we not examining the source of these allegations? Oh, maybe because when the news broke, it was framed like this from the Telegraph. Cambridge's diversity poster boy in plagiarism row. They make it so clear that this is about what they see as DEI and people of color reaching beyond their station. In case there was any questions, Amanda Platell from the Daily Mail just takes out a bullhorn and finds a way to bring in Meghan because, of course, she writes that, quote, in a normal world, Jason, with his 2 GCSEs and a degree in PE and education studies, would be a PE teacher, while Meghan would be a bit part TV actress. Yet both refused to accept the hand that fate and talent had dealt them. What the fuck? There are similarities between Meghan and Jason. It's the media coverage. A study from The Guardian found that Meghan got twice as many negative headlines as positive ones in the first 20 months of her marriage. Not only that, she was receiving almost double the coverage to the Duchess of Cambridge, Catherine, Princess of Wales. 29,000 tabloid stories, and 21,000 were negative, compared to Kate, where just 4,300 of 14,000 were negative. That is going to impact how people are perceived and also someone's mental health. And yet a lot of the media scoffed at Meghan when she said in the Harry and Meghan documentary that she was having unaliving thoughts during this period. Stick around for more. In part 2, we are going to discuss where this information came from. Another Meghan tie-in, because The Telegraph's going to telegraph. And what makes reporting so different in the UK versus the US. Be sure to subscribe and come back later for more.
This is a message for Prince Harry and Prince Harry only. In case you see this, I want you to know that you taking your wife and kids off Misery Island was the right thing to do. If you had any doubt in your mind that your actions were too decisive or too aggressive, they were not. After seeing the British press hound Jason Arday and Caroline Flack to death, there can be no doubt in your mind that you not only saved your wife's sanity, but probably her life too.
Jason Arday, who passed yesterday, had nearly 250 articles written about him over the last 3 weeks. 250 articles. The British press hounded him. This is all over plagiarism. Obviously, he did something wrong. But you have people who have done so much worse, but they don't get that same scrutiny. Are you surprised someone like Meghan Markle chose to leave? And now do you see the reason why? And what they have in common?
Squaddies, stop scrolling for a second. This isn't just another headline. A human being has died. Jason Arday was only 41. His family has spoken about what they describe as years of sustained abuse and misinformation, saying the pressure became overwhelming for him. He had resigned from Cambridge just days before his death. Police have said his death was unexpected, but is not being treated as suspicious. And I don't care what your opinion is about the allegations surrounding him. You can investigate somebody, you can ask tough questions, you can demand answers. That's journalism. But there's a massive difference between holding somebody accountable and turning a human being into a public punching bag. Because think about how this works. A journalist sits behind a computer, types the headline, hits publish. Boom, the story is out. People click, people share it. Another outlet picks it up. Then social media gets hold of it. And suddenly somebody's entire life is being discussed by people they've never even met. Meanwhile, that person still has to wake up the next morning, still has a family, still has people who love them, still has to walk outside and face the world. That's the part that can disappear when journalism becomes a race for clicks. And let's be honest, once the pylon starts, everybody suddenly becomes an expert. One person writes something, another person adds a little spice, someone else makes a nasty joke, then another outlet turns the whole thing into another headline. Before you know it, you've got a full-blown media circus. And the person standing in the middle, they're not a circus, they're a human being. That's why Jason's death should force some serious questions about how journalism operates. Because being a public figure doesn't mean you've surrendered your humanity. Being accused of wrongdoing doesn't mean you're no longer a person. And being investigated doesn't give everybody permission to treat you like entertainment. Where is the line? That's what Britain needs to ask. Because once the headline is published, you can't always see what happens on the other side of that screen. You don't see the person sitting alone reading thousands of comments. You don't see their family watching it happen. You don't see what the constant pressure is doing behind closed doors. And that's why I keep coming back to one simple point. There has to be accountability without cruelty. Journalism has a job to do, but journalists are human beings too. So are the people they write about. And if Jason Arday's death doesn't make this industry stop and seriously examine where that line has gone, then honestly, what will? Because behind every headline, there is a human life. And that should never be forgotten.
Now, Squaddies, this is where Harry comes into the conversation. Because people love to ask, why did Harry take Meghan away from Britain? As if he woke up one morning and thought, you know what, let's just pack everything up and move thousands of miles away for absolutely no reason. Come on. Harry already knew what the British tabloid machine could do. He had grown up with it. He watched what happened to his mother. He experienced the cameras, the headlines, the intrusion, and the constant obsession with his family. So when Meghan arrived and suddenly found herself facing that same level of attention, Harry wasn't looking at it like some ordinary newspaper story. He knew what was behind the headline. He knew what relentless attention could do to a person's life. And then you've got Meghan, a woman who had suddenly gone from being a private American actress to having her every move dissected. Her clothes, her family, her friendships, her pregnancy, her personality, her marriage, everything became content. And at some point, Harry had to look at that situation and think, no, this cannot become our normal. That's not Harry being dramatic. That's a husband looking at his wife and saying, I've seen this movie before, and I don't like the ending. And Squaddies, let's be honest, most regular people would do exactly the same thing. If your partner was being followed, criticized, mocked, and constantly picked apart in the newspapers, would you just sit there saying, "Well, darling, that's show business"? Absolutely not. You'd be looking for the nearest exit. And that's why I understand why some royal watchers say Harry got Meghan out of there. Not because we can claim the press would definitely have physically harmed Meghan. That's not the argument. The argument is that constant pressure is real, constant intrusion is real, public humiliation is real. And when you're dealing with that day after day, it can take a serious toll on a person. Harry knew that better than most. He wasn't just protecting Meghan from one nasty article. He was trying to create distance between his family and an environment he had spent his entire life dealing with. And here's the part I find fascinating. People sometimes talk about Harry leaving Britain as though it was some ridiculous luxury decision. But maybe the better question is, what had Harry already seen that made him so determined to protect his wife and children from the same machine? Because Harry didn't need to be told that a headline is just a headline. He knew there was a human being underneath it. His mother was one, and now his wife was becoming one. So Harry made a choice. Get his family somewhere they could breathe, somewhere they could build a life without every single day being dictated by the next newspaper story. And honestly, Squaddies, if protecting your wife and children means getting them away from an environment you no longer trust, that's not weakness. That's called being a husband and a father.
Now, Squaddies, this is where I have to say, really, Amanda? Seriously? Jason Arday has just died. His family is grieving. Britain is trying to process what happened. And your instinct is to write an article asking why his story reminds you of Meghan. Come on. There has to be a moment when even the newspaper machine says not everything needs to become a Meghan story. A man has died. That's the starting point. Not Meghan. Not another royal comparison. Not another excuse to drag her name back into the headlines. A human being has died. And yet somehow we're back to Meghan again. At this point, you could probably write an article about the weather, and somebody at the Daily Mail would find a way to squeeze Meghan into paragraph 3. And that's what I find so disturbing about this whole thing. Because imagine being Jason's family. You're grieving, you're dealing with the loss of someone you love, you're watching the public debate everything surrounding his final weeks, and then you see his death being used as a bridge into another conversation about Meghan. You'd have to ask, seriously? Is this really the moment? There should still be something called basic human decency. Sometimes you don't need to squeeze another headline out of a tragedy. Sometimes you need to put the keyboard down. Sometimes you need to say, someone has died. Let the family grieve. Because when every tragedy becomes another opportunity for clicks, outrage, and recycled arguments, people start looking less like human beings and more like raw material for content. And that's the problem. The headline becomes more important than the human being. That's where journalism needs to take a hard look at itself, because behind that article isn't just a name on a screen. It's somebody's son, somebody's friend, somebody's family. And Jason's story should not be treated like another convenient excuse to restart the Meghan debate. So Amanda, I'll put it very simply. A man has died. His family is grieving. Maybe, just maybe, this one didn't need to be about Meghan. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a journalist can write is not another headline. It's nothing at all. Now, Squaddies, this is where I want to zoom out for a minute. Because this isn't just about the Daily Mail. It's bigger than one newspaper. We're talking about the culture of journalism itself. Because behind every headline is an actual person. A mother, a father, a husband, a wife, a son, a daughter, a friend. And that person doesn't magically stop being human because their name has appeared in a newspaper. That's what seems to get lost. A journalist can type a story, hit publish, and move on to the next assignment. But the person in that story, they have to live with it. Imagine waking up tomorrow and millions of people have been told something about you. People you've never met are judging you. Strangers are insulting you. Your family is reading it. Your children might see it. And the journalist who wrote it? They're already working on tomorrow's story. That's the bit I think this industry needs to remember. Because journalism isn't supposed to be, how many people can we get angry today? It's supposed to be, what does the public genuinely need to know? There's a difference. Ask the tough questions, investigate powerful people, expose wrongdoing, absolutely. But don't forget there is a human being sitting on the other side of that headline. And Jason Arday's death should make people seriously think about that, not just for 1 week, not until the next big story comes along, properly. Because if every scandal becomes a feeding frenzy and every tragedy becomes another opportunity for clicks, eventually somebody has to say, hold on, where did basic humanity go? And this brings me straight back to Harry and Meghan. Harry didn't need a media studies degree to understand this machine. He grew up watching it. He saw what happened to his mother. He experienced the intrusion himself. Then Meghan entered the picture and suddenly she was being dissected from every possible angle. So when Harry decided his wife and children needed a different life, we should all ask a much more serious question. What had he already seen that made him so determined to get his family away from that environment? Because Harry knew something a lot of people forget. A headline doesn't disappear when you close the newspaper. The person named in it still has to live, still has to go home, still has to look their family in the eyes, still has to wake up the next morning. So yes, Squaddies, hold journalism accountable too, because journalism has a responsibility to tell the truth, but it also has a responsibility to remember the humanity of the people it's writing about. Behind every headline is a human life, and maybe it's time this industry remembered that before it hits publish. And that's all for today, Squaddies. Thank you all for watching. I am your host, Miles. To my returning viewers, thank you for always showing love, and to everyone new, welcome to the family. If you enjoyed this video, like, share, subscribe, and join the membership. Catch you in the next one. God bless you, and have a blessed week ahead.